tonight, look, I'm not going to mince my words. This is a very big day. And we can't underscore that point enough. And I just wanted to take a step back for a moment. And I want to kind of unpack in a way we haven't before exactly what has happened today and the significance of it. Because 1 year to the day of former President Trump's second impeachment, based on, you recall, his alleged role in inciting the insurrection on January 6th, the one that attacked the very citadel of our democracy because, you see, he didn't want to admit that he had lost the race, which he did. Remember, ever since then, and since Merrick Garland was sworn in as the Attorney General of the United States, we know that he has been ridiculed for his pacing in the January 6th investigation. I mean, you've heard it. You may have said it so yourself. He's not moving fast enough. He's contemplative to the point of paralysis. He's just going to let them all off the hook just so that the Department of Justice is not still somehow perceived as political as it was under the prior administration. And even though his DOJ, as you know, has charged more than, 700 people connected to the attack, and that's just so far, look, he's been well aware of the frustrations out there. He hears them. He actually responded last week, and he vowed that it was far from over. Remember this?
The actions we have taken thus far will not be our last. The Justice Department remains committed to holding all January 6 perpetrators at any level accountable under law, as long as it takes.
As long as it takes. I bet some of you probably heard that, and a part of you, somewhere within you, you conflated this Attorney General with maybe a Robert Mueller, right? You had the deja vu of the Mueller years. Hope it's not too soon to mention them. And you probably rolled your eyes thinking that it might only be the minions or a drawn-out process, and if it's the minions, then not the leaders who'd be prosecuted for the worst attack on our democracy in modern American history. But he told you, as long as it takes. And I bet you probably would take a much longer period of time, that it's still not over, but more would be coming. Well, guess what? Here it is today. The first charges of seditious conspiracy have now been filed in connection with the terror that we all saw and witnessed unfold at the Capitol. Now, this isn't against the President Donald Trump, or the then president, and now defeated President Trump, or any of his aides. But these people on the screen, they're not insignificant players in the grand scheme of things. And the DOJ has just filed these charges against, as you're seeing, the leader of the Oath Keepers, Stewart, Rhodes, and 10 other people. So this was not, by all accounts in the indictment, well, it wasn't spontaneous if you ever thought it was. It's somehow you construct gallows on the fly, and everyone just happened to be here on January 6th. Spontaneity did not respond as your first thought here, was it? It wasn't a crowd going wild all of a sudden, unprompted, or a group of overzealous, what was the phrase, tourists, according to some members of Congress. And according to the DOJ, January 6th was highly and allegedly organized and also planned. They lay it all out in the indictment that was handed down by a grand jury yesterday, but not unsealed until today, which is why we're now just learning about it. And these defendants, they're accused of conspiring and organizing into teams, quote, prepared and willing to use force and to transport firearms and ammunition into Washington, D.C. I mean, they're accused of conspiring with other people to oppose the fancy language, the force, the execution of the laws governing the transfer of presidential power. A fancy way of telling you, trying to stop what we come to expect as the peaceful transition of power. And this man you're seeing on the screen is the biggest fish of the 11. And where we always talk about who's the biggest fish, who's it going to be, you're looking at him, the founder of the far-right militia, Oath Keepers. And he's accused of all kinds of plotting. I mean, the indictment says that even on his way to D.C. on January 3rd, he allegedly bought an AR platform rifle and other firearms equipment. We're talking about sights and mounts and triggers and slings. Tourist? I think not. And the DOJ says that he sent out a chat room message, get this, on November 5th, which is 2 days after the election. November 5th, but even before the race had ever been called, saying, quote, we aren't getting through this without a civil war. Too late for that. Prepare your mind, body, and spirit. How can 2 days after an election be too late for what exactly? And talk of a civil war on November 5th alone? Look, these defendants are facing serious jail time if convicted, but I bet some of you are surprised that the word treason hasn't come up. Which brings me to what I want to explain about the difference between treason and sedition. And look, I know that a lot of people will use the term treason colloquially, casually. That's treasonous. This is treason behavior. And I get why we say that casually, but it's not a casual term. It's a legal term that requires the government to prove something, that someone has actually aided and abetted an actual enemy of the United States. And the way that's been interpreted as a nation is as how or whom we are at war with. That's the enemy of the United States. Now, we are politically divided, and no one can really argue that we are not, unfortunately. But we're not literally at war under that definition as it has been interpreted. And there's also a political angle to this, because the Founding Fathers, recall, they intentionally limited the application of that term in the Constitution because they were concerned that, like the case in jolly old England, that this term and this accusation would be used as some excuse and opportunity to silence opposition and punish political dissent. I mean, even Henry VIII had one of his wives executed because they defined treason so broadly and so subjectively to harm the king that apparently even allegations of adultery somehow qualified. But thankfully, in the United States of America, we don't have a king. And we don't want a king. And that history, the political issues, constricts the way we are able or want to charge certain crimes. But seditious conspiracy, well, that's a horse of a different color. In fact, it might surprise you, it's a more serious crime technically than insurrection. And it's when two or more people conspire, the meeting of the minds, conspire to overthrow or destroy by force the government. And what it is a definitive statement that those weren't tourists after all. So where will this investigation go next, and how high up the alleged conspiracy are we really going to go? Here, we've got three key guests tonight as we take this news apart. We have a lawyer for the Oath Keepers founder, Stewart Rhodes, who's also